third Sunday after the Ascension of Mary, Mother of our Lord Jesus Christ. And also, as present or all Malayalis, we are observing Onam in our parish today. There are at least few people who are skeptical about celebrating such festivals. Some people say the one who was sent to the other world is a Satan, and therefore he cannot be remembered in any of the liturgical acts of churches. Some people say, well, that is a Kerala festival, and we are Christians, we cannot do that. Well, those two, and if there is any more explanation against observing that festival of East, is simply absurd. God works in history. And that is why God, when Moses asked him, whom shall I say that sent me? God said, I shall show you what I am. Of course, the Greek translation of it and the Malayalam translation which followed it did not understand that matter with them. The Hebrew language in which the answer from God is written has no present tense. So it cannot be translated as I am that I am. No. Those who study Hebrew language would say that particular statement from God, which is appear, assure, appear, is appeal imperfect, which means possessive and future tense. So it cannot be translated as present tense. Then again, there is another issue with Hebrew language. It has no vowels. So FPA can be pronounced as a, which is very difficult. And out of that, the name Yahweh came. And it later became a proper noun or name of God, which again was not doing justice to the identity, personality, and integrity of God himself. Moses came to Egypt and stood before Pharaoh. He argued with Pharaoh, and finally Pharaoh had to leave them free. From that moment onwards, Moses and his people, the liberated people of 12 tribes of Jacob, traveled through various cultures. And when they traveled through, on the one hand they tried to keep the faith in the liberated God, but at the same time encountered cultures and practices of the region that they passed through. One major cultural influence they had was giving the 10 Commandments. Those 10 Commandments were not originally invented by Moses or as such given by God. Of course, it is written like that. It was given, of course, by God, but through a different channel. We know that Abraham came from this province, the bank of Euphrates Highlands. There was a king called who ruled the country in a very peaceful, organized manner. Hammurabi, he codified 10 statutes that will guide the people in an organized way. And that was translated into Moses' faith and became 10 commandments. And that is given by God in the given context. From then, again, there were several occasions where Israel had to conquer cultural context and accepted, integrated into their faith, but again formulated according to their faith in God. And that is how we have the creation stories. Many of us think that there is only one story in the book of Genesis. There are two stories. The first one is Genesis chapter 1, verse 1 to Genesis chapter 2, first part of verse 4. And from then onwards, we have a second story. If you clearly and carefully read that, we will see that things were created and explained in two different ways. That was the kind of stories that spread in Mesopotamia. While Israel was living in exile in Mesopotamia, they realized that God is not a God in Jerusalem alone. Rather, He is the Lord of the whole world. They didn't have that idea. And that is why they then came to Babylon, sat on the bank of the river and cried aloud and said, "How can we sing the Lord's song in a foreign land?" We have a famous song by Onam. Okay. They never thought God is in Babylon because they thought their God lives in the temple built by Solomon. Of course, God guided them through the wilderness, but He came and settled according to David's theory in Jerusalem, because it was David who brought the ark into Jerusalem and asked all people to come and worship Him in Jerusalem. That was a political move by David, because people were fighting with each other just like our church. And then he wanted to unite them. Otherwise, earlier, the presence of God was with every tribe, and they were carrying around the tablet and everything in it, and also the God's presence. Sometimes they were successful, sometimes they were not successful. So David thought they should be united, and that unity can happen only in the name of God. So he brought the ark to Jerusalem, and later Solomon built a temple and established the ark in the Holy of Holies, taking God away from the people's presence. But while Israel was living in Babylon, they looked around and slowly realized, because of the second Isaiah's prophecy. Actually, Isaiah's book is a compilation of three books. Chapter 1 to 39 is Isaiah from Jerusalem, and chapter 40 to 55 is Isaiah who lived in Babylon, and 56 to 66. Again, a third Isaiah who lived in the 4th century in Jerusalem. The first one lived in the 8th century, the second one lived in the 6th century, and the third one lived in the 4th century. But it was all one scroll, and that is why we have one Isaiah. The second Isaiah, starting with chapter 40, called the people and said, "Comfort my people. Comfort my people. Lord has decided to deliver you." And that was a primary call to go back to Jerusalem. Not many people went. But during their life in Babylon, they looked around and saw so many things, part of their culture. They adopted many of them. And that is how they established synagogues. They established worship, preaching in synagogue. They started collecting the sayings of prophets and other leaders of the community, and that is how we have the books now as a collection. During that time, cultural elements came to Israeli community and were translated, not abandoned, by them to fit into the faith of Israel. And that is how the Christian community also did. For example, Paul asked all the women to cover their head. Not that Christ wanted that to happen, but in Corinth, there was a system of brothel houses. And in front of the brothel houses, women will come out and sit and call people showing their hair. And when Christianity came, women were liberated because Jesus liberated. And they started praising God in loud voice without any limit. And people started saying, well, this is another brothel house. To avoid that criticism, Paul asked Christians to cover their head. Not because that need to be a universal law or statute. Rather, under the circumstance, taking the cultural context seriously, all wanted women to cover their head. But later that became an oppressive element. What I mean is, religions function receiving cultural elements from the region they establish. Religion primarily can be explained as faith expressed in culture. In Kerala, you will not see the chairs for people to sit down. These days, because people have chikungunya and knee problem, maybe few chairs, not everybody on the chair. But in this country, the cultural context is different. So we set chairs for people to sit down. In Kerala, people will not enter the church with their shoes or slippers on. We, at many places, do not have church buildings of our own. So we rent out places. And in Canada, I worshiped some time back on the basement of a bar. And the moment you step into it, your feet will be glued because the previous day's party was there. So you can't you can't enter that without wearing a shoe. And then again, during snow, of course in Texas that is not an issue. But in northern regions of Canada or in New York, people cannot stand on the bare ground without anything in their feet. Culturally, we need to transform and live a life of Christian according to that cultural element and transform our lifestyle according to that. Now coming to Onam celebration, it's primarily a harvest festival. Of course, we don't have any paddy field or wheat field for ourselves, but we have vegetable fields in our backyard. We collect chira, payar, cucumber, tannimattan, and all kinds of those things. We need to thank God for what He gives us for us to live in this world. So Onam can be our harvest festival through which we thank God for what He gives us to survive. Again, second, it's also a political event. We know that Malayalis were earlier Adi Dravidas. Adi Dravidas lived in many parts of the country. But in the early centuries of BC, Aryans came and settled in northern India and conquered many of those regions and subordinated the people over there. And they introduced Chaturvarnya and all kinds of their statutes for them to have a better life. But southern region, only very late, which means during the 6th or 4th century AD, only Brahmins came. When Brahmins came, they saw a well-established administrative system and a just ruler of the Dravidian race in Kerala. The Brahmins did not like it. They took over all the land and made it God's land theirs. And they removed the rulers and established rulers of the Chaturvarnya. But we were not happy. The Dravidians were not happy. So what they did was, they reenacted the whole story of removing Dravidians from the region and establishing Aryan supremacy once a year. That is all. That is a struggle against the overlordship of Brahmins or Chaturvarnya system, which was forced into our system, which was Dravidian system. Now only Tamil Nadu successfully resisted the overlordship of the Aryan community over the Dravidian and culture. For us, we remember Jesus came to this world and took away the sinfulness from our midst. It's not that once in a while evil, rather it's a continuous event. So Onam can be celebrated and observed every day. Because on the one hand, It is a day that we thank God for all the blessings and our crops that God grant us to live in prosperity and happiness. On the second hand, it's a remembrance of the old when Adam went away from God and Jesus brought us all back to his fold. So, happy Onam to you all. Now, we are having 8 days set with Lent. I talked about that yesterday, about Mary. Today, the text for Holy Quran comes from St. Matthew's Gospel, chapter 17. Jesus was talking to his disciples about his imminent suffering and death. And the disciples were very sad about it. Yeah, that is the problem of humanity. To raise a child is not an easy thing. But we enjoy it. But there are people who do not want to have a child because of the trouble which they don't have to endure in raising a child. So simply they leave each other or marry in the same sex and be happy about it. Any prosperity or success will come only through joy. And that is why when the captains of the temple came and asked Peter for thanks, which was established by the government for the temple people to collect for the repair and maintenance of the temple. Each person one coin. And then Peter was asked to pay that on behalf of himself and his Master Jesus Christ. Peter had no money. So he came to Jesus and started scratching the back of his head. And Jesus understood what is the problem. Jesus brings in a natural issue. Why should we pay? We are the children of God. And children of God doesn't need to pay any tax to be children. Rather, they are de facto children. They are not adopted, and therefore we don't need to pay. But Jesus did not want to make it a big issue. So he said, go and do what you really know and work and make money. കേരളത്തിലെ പല ആളുകളെക്കുറിച്ച് മതങ്ങളായാലും രാഷ്ട്രീയക്കാരായാലും ഉള്ള പരാതി അഴിമതിയെക്കുറിച്ചാണ്. ഈസി മണി, അതാണ് പലപ്പോഴും നമ്മുടെ ചെറുപ്പക്കാർ ഈ കാലത്ത് വിദേശങ്ങളിൽ പോകാൻ താല്പര്യപ്പെടുന്നു. അവിടെ ചെന്നാൽ എളുപ്പമാണ്. എളുപ്പമല്ലാന്ന് നിങ്ങൾക്ക് എൻ്റെ ഒരു കസിൻ നാട്ടിൽ നിന്ന് നല്ല ജോലി ഉണ്ടായിരുന്നവർ അമേരിക്കയിൽ സ്വർഗരാജ്യം തേടി ഇവിടെ വന്ന് കഷ്ടപ്പാടും ദുരിതവുമായി ഒരു ബേസ്മെന്റിൽ താമസം തുടങ്ങി. പള്ളിയിൽ ചെന്നപ്പോൾ പറഞ്ഞു വലിയ കഷ്ടപ്പാടാണ്. അപ്പോൾ അവിടെയുള്ള ആളുകൾ പറഞ്ഞു 5 കൊല്ലത്തേക്ക് ബുദ്ധിമുട്ടായിരുന്നു, അത് കഴിയുമ്പോഴും ഒരു പരിധിയായിരുന്നു. പക്ഷേ ആഗ്രഹം എളുപ്പത്തിൽ ഉണ്ടാക്കാൻ പറ്റും. Jesus, who fed thousands of people out of few loaves, could have easily managed the matter by showing the hands in the air and collecting some money from there and give to Peter. But Jesus asked Peter to do what job he knows, and that was fishing. Go and cast your net. collect a fish, that is a bigger God. There will be a coin which will be enough for you and me. So what we earn out of our toil in this world is not just for us. That is for our Lord. And our Lord doesn't need money anymore. His faithful need. The people who are really sick, suffering, and who are in need of money. The question would be, do we follow the pattern that Jesus set with Peter? Or we add on our own comfort, our own luxury, and our own environment, and assume that we live in that. This is a serious question. Peter was the one who cast the hook and collected the fish. But Peter had to share that with someone else. Of course, we can say that was the advice given by but that was not the advice. That was rather a burden set upon Peter. That is the question during this Onam season also. Do we share our well-being with those who are in need? Jesus had to pay the tax. It was not he who cast the hook and collected the fish and the money in the fish mouth. That is a challenge the church set before us. Today is the third Sunday after the Ascension of Mary. Mary lived her life not for herself, but for others. We live our life for whom? That is the billion-dollar question. Just for us or for God's creation? I'm extremely grateful to Sanach and Mary, to Lord, and all of you for giving this opportunity to be with you and worship God after quite some time. Actually, I was supposed to be here in 2022, but COVID said not go back. So I went back home. Now I'm back with you. Thank you. God bless you. We shall